Okay, so here's a little update. I was not planning on filming right now, but I was in here editing a video about King Tut, my crowned Crested Gecko. Check that out if you haven't seen it. And I was going into the reptile room to mist down the Crested Geckos, and I always check on the eggs before going to bed. I didn't think that any were gonna hatch yet, so to my surprise and shock, I came into the gecko room, pulled this out. Oh, my mom just recently came back from a baby shower, and she brought that back, so I put it in there to be funny. But anyways, I pulled this out, and one hatched. And when I checked on the eggs earlier today, there were no signs of them hatching. They were huge, so I knew it was going to be soon, but they weren't like sweating. Sometimes before the eggs hatch, they tend to sweat. I didn't really see any signs, so I was kind of shocked. So I was actually about to get ready for bed, but now I got to do this instead, so I'm going to get this set up. And it's funny because tomorrow morning was when I actually planned on making the video of how I teach you guys how to set this up, and so that way I could have these ready because I knew they were going to hatch very soon. But I got to do this one sooner, but since it's late at night and I want the video to be good quality, I'll just film it tomorrow teaching you guys how to do this, but I'm going to get this one set up now, so I'll update you in the morning with how this one's doing. I was going to film this comparison video tomorrow, but just in case this one hatches next, I figured I'd show you this now. So look at the size difference. These, I don't know exactly when these were laid. I found these, I have a bioactive enclosure, and I found these about a month ago, but it's because these latest ones were due, so I was looking for those. So now that I know her regular cycle, and she's gonna lay eggs each month about the same time, so now I know when to check, when to watch her, so I know how to find these better. But anyways, when I was looking for her latest ones, I came across these, and I noticed that they were bigger, and when I candled them to see if they were viable or not, I noticed that it didn't have that trademark, like, Cheerio-looking embryo that you see with the very freshly laid eggs. I'll insert a picture of that so you can see what I'm talking about. But I did see that these were obviously alive, they were developed, there was something big in them, so I knew they were way ahead of the other ones that I had. So I put them in the incubator, and one has hatched. And this one's very close because, again, look at the size comparison. So then these two smallest ones were laid August 9th. These two, which are slightly bigger, were July 8th. And then these ones were at least a month or two ahead of the July ones. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that. Also, I must have just come across this like right when it hatched because it alarmed me for a second. Because when I went to move it into this enclosure, it was not moving, it was still kind of stiff. But I think it was just, you know, getting used to being out of the egg because you can see it's already climbing up the wall and it's active now. So I'm gonna give it some privacy, some peace and quiet. I'll turn off the lights and just leave it be for tonight, and we'll check back in the morning. Okay, so as promised, I'm gonna show you how to set up an enclosure for freshly hatched geckos. It's super easy. For them, since they're so tiny, you want to keep it pretty basic. Because one, like I said, they are very tiny, so you don't want them in this huge, elaborate enclosure because they could get lost, overwhelmed, have trouble finding their food, and plus it would be harder to monitor their growth and make sure they're going to the bathroom and eating properly if they're in a huge enclosure. You also want to keep it kind of basic because obviously they're going to be growing. So this won't be a permanent habitat, so why dump a lot of money into something that they're not going to be in for that long? So this is what I used for the hatchlings. I got this on Amazon. If you type in reptile feeding bin, this will come up. And it's really nice because it already has little air holes in it. It has a lid that snaps on, nice and secure, nice and tight. And I like it because it's kind of divided. So that way if you only wanted to open part of it and keep the rest closed, you can. So that's really nice. And you can see thanks to these little grooves, they're stackable, so that can help save space. Some people will keep their hatchlings together. I personally do not do that because there's always that slight chance that you might have them not get along. Usually when they're this young, it's not an issue, but I don't like to risk it. And plus, I like to have them separate so that way I can monitor them both as individuals. And plus, sometimes they look very similar when they first hatch, and I want to be able to fully tell them apart. So we're going to use paper towels to line the bottom of this. And the paper towels are nice because, one, it's not a loose substrate so the babies won't accidentally eat it. And two, since it's white, you'll be able to see very easily on here that the geckos are going to the bathroom, so that way you can make sure that everything is functioning as it should be with them. Make sure that they're eating properly. And I'm not going to do this right now because this is for the second egg that I showed you last night. It has not hatched yet, so there's no point in making this all wet and humid now. But what I would do if I was about to put it in here would be I would take my little mister and I would spray the sides of the enclosure and I would spray the paper towel so that it's damp but not soaking wet. You want to keep it nice and humid because shortly after hatching, within the first usually 1 to 2 days, your Crested Gecko is going to shed its skin for the first time and they're going to eat their shed skin. So you want it to be nice and humid so that it comes off of them nice and easily so that they can eat it and then they can start to grow properly. They will drink the little water droplets off of here and off of the fake plants I'm about to add, but you can also add a small water bottle cap and just partially fill it up with water. You don't want to put too much in there just in case. And then usually on the second or third day, it will be safe to feed your Crested Geckos and you can use a similar sized cap to put a little bit of the food in there for them. But we'll discuss food in a little bit. Right now let's finish getting this set up. So after the paper towels are down, I'm going to add some fake plants. You can get fake plants like this basically at any pet store. Sometimes feed stores even have these. If you can't find them at a store near you, you can get them on Amazon. And then save your empty paper towel rolls and toilet paper rolls because they make a really nice and cheap hide. Now you want to make sure that you change out your paper towels and the rolls regularly because you don't want them to get wet for too long because if you don't change them out and they're just damp all the time, you run the risk of growing mold, and that's not good for anyone. So make sure you change these out regularly. Now, as far as the care goes, it's going to be very similar to caring for an adult Crested Gecko. You want to keep the temperature and the humidity the same. Since they're babies and they're growing, after they have that first shed, you do want to offer them food at least every day. One thing about Crested Geckos that makes them so easy to keep is the fact that their main diet can be a powdered diet. Repashy and Pangea are some of the most popular ones, but there are some other brands out there as well. And basically all you do is take the powder, mix it with some water until it's about the consistency of baby food, and then you feed it to your geckos, and there's a ton of different flavors too. And once your geckos are a little bit bigger, you can start introducing little teeny tiny pinhead crickets to them, and then of course as they grow and get larger, you can slightly start to increase the size of the insect. The powdered food can be their main diet, and you can supplement with the live insects a couple of times a week. When you're feeding them crickets, you want to make sure that you dust the crickets in calcium with vitamin D3. Most powdered diets will already have that in there, so you don't need to add it to that. But if you're feeding them bugs, you do have to add this because reptiles cannot maintain their own calcium and vitamins in captivity without the help of supplements. Make sure that before you feed the insects to your gecko that you're giving the insects themselves a healthy diet with fruits and vegetables so that way they last longer and live longer until you're ready to give them to your gecko. And so that way they will also be healthier and filled with more vitamins and nutrients for when your reptile consumes them. So yeah, like I was showing you last night, gecko eggs are very different than chicken eggs. Chicken eggs, since, they're harder, they have that nice strong shell, and they're going to stay the same size that they were at the time that they were laid. Now, with the gecko eggs, they lay them smaller, and since reptile eggs are a little bit softer, a bit more flexible than chicken eggs, so as the reptile embryo grows, the shell is going to expand like I was showing you last night, so that was really cool. And speaking of last night, let me show you an update on the baby. So you can see it has a little paper towel tube to hide it in all these plants, and yet it chooses to hide up here in the one corner that doesn't have anything, right in the open. There's still a couple little pebbles left from the incubator. I'm going to remove those just so that way it doesn't accidentally ingest them. She, or he, I'm not sure yet, has not started to shed yet, but when they do start to shed, they often will rub against things to help get the skin off, so I don't want it to accidentally get stuck to him, so I'm going to pull those out once I stop recording here in a second, just to be safe. But yeah, it's looking really healthy. When I first took it out of the incubator last night, like I was telling you, it was really stiff and very still, and I was like, oh no, it's dead, or something's wrong with it. But I think I had just found it right when it had come out of the egg, and it was tired, because hatching, it can't be easy. I mean, think about all that hard work they do trying to get out of the egg, and plus, they're just teeny tiny little babies. So I think it was just exhausted and probably stiff from being folded up inside of that egg. But once it figured out how to use its muscles, it started hopping all over the enclosure and climbing up the walls, so that was such a relief. And for me, this was such a milestone because about 6 years ago, I tried breeding Crested Geckos. And at the time, I invested in what I could afford at the time. It wasn't the best, but it was still pretty nice geckos. I had a really nice red pinstripe and a red and white harlequin. But my goal, what I really wanted to be working with back then, were Lilly Whites. But at the time, they were just out of my price range. Well, long story short, the geckos I did invest in ended up being infertile. I don't know if it was just one or the other, or just as a pair if they weren't compatible. But just it did not work out. So I ended up giving those geckos to my friend. And in the meantime, between those 6 years and now, I still kept reptiles as pets. I still had my main original Crested Gecko Gonzo, who I've had since I was 13. So reptiles have always been a part of my life, but I kind of took a break from the idea of breeding. But it was always in the back of my mind because I'm the type of person that doesn't really like to give up. And since it was a goal of mine, it was something that I was still very interested in. And that interest, that passion started to come back last year. I was like, you know what, you only live once, so I'm gonna try it again. And the first time I tried that was 6 years ago. I was younger then. Now I have a little bit more experience. I'm making more money, so I was able to save up and invest in the morphs that I really wanted to be working with. So it's just cool to think that 6 years ago, at the time, I thought that having a Lilly White was unattainable. And I know that might sound silly because so many people have them now, but for me, this has been a goal that I reached. And not only that, but I also have the privilege of getting to work with the Sable morph now, which is still very fairly new. So that's really exciting because it's just funny to think that at the time I thought it would be impossible to get a Lilly White, but now I not only have a Lilly White, but I also have a Sable. The Sable has not been bred yet, but she will be in the near future. But to get back to my point, it's just so funny that I went from that fast forward to now where the very first hatchling that I hatched out was a Lilly White, which when I first started all these years ago trying to breed geckos, that was my goal. So that was just really cool. It was a really nice small victory for me. So this project is just very sentimental. And you know what? Like I said, life is short. You should celebrate all of the victories, big and small. So I'm really excited to see this one shed and see how over time its colors and pattern will develop. I'm excited to see all the other hatchlings start to hatch. And I'm looking forward to pairing up some of my other projects as well. So make sure you subscribe so you can follow along, and so that when the time comes, once they're old enough and once the weather's good, and I start selling them and shipping them out, you can be aware if you're interested. I also just recently legally filed a trade name for my business. It's called the Gecko Gallery, and I have a Facebook page for it. And like I said, I'm still very new, starting out, so we still got quite a ways to go. So there's not a whole lot going on the Facebook page yet, but if you want to follow it so you can stay updated, it's called the Gecko Gallery. It's on Facebook, and I'm probably going to make an Instagram page for it soon too. So I'm going to put these enclosures back upstairs in the reptile room, and then I will update you once that other egg starts to hatch. So I'm going to candle this Crested Gecko egg just for educational purposes only. I am very experienced with candling bird eggs. It is a little bit different with reptiles. Now, some reptile species, you cannot move the egg once it's laid, or you could risk drowning the embryo. But Crested Geckos, that does not matter. If you move their eggs around, it's not really going to hurt anything. I mean, obviously you still want to be careful, and I recommend for the most part, once you put them in their little incubator deli cups, to just leave them alone, let nature take its course. But since its clutch mate has already been out for a while, I just wanted to double check and make sure that this egg was still viable. So we're going to candle it and see if it's still alive. You can see it's really large, it's still nice and white, no molds, so I'm saying it still looks promising that it's going to hatch. So I'm going to hold the flashlight up to it real quick, and then we'll leave it alone after that. Whoa! Never mind, it's alive. Oh, my dog is knocking on the door trying to get in. So if you hear scratching, just don't mind that. Look at its little tail wrapped around itself like a scarf. Sometimes babies can be a little bit crazy, so we're just going to make this easy since it's the only egg left in this little cup and put it in its little enclosure from the start, so that way when it's out I can just pull off the lid and it'll already be contained. Oh, and you can ignore all that writing on there. I am reusing a cup I got from back when I got my chameleon gecko. Don't worry, I sterilized it. So yeah, that information does not pertain to this little dude. But as you can see on the other enclosure, I do recommend keeping them labeled. For the past few hours, its head was just poking out of the egg, so I left it alone, and now, a few hours later, it's finally all the way out. Looks like another Lilly White. Look, you see that little hood? It's shedding already. They shed a little bit faster than I thought. It's only been out of the egg for a few hours. And then here's the one that hatched last night. Looking good. So it is the next day. Since they both have successfully shed their skin with no issues, they're going to be getting their first meal tonight. So here is the little one that hatched out yesterday. Its head came shooting out of the egg really fast, and it startled me really bad. It made me jump. So I'm calling this one Jump Scare, because I gotta call them something while they're here with me. And this little one seems to really like hiding in the plants. And as they shed and as they grow, all that yellowing color on them is going to turn more white and it's going to start to spread. So I'm really excited to see how they develop as they age. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned so that way you can see how they progress, because I'll keep you guys updated on them. And on all the other ones that start to hatch. And then here's the first one that hatched. I call this little one Sploot, because when it sleeps it likes to do a little sploot. So I thought that was cute. This one tends to like to sit out in the open more. So yeah, I feel very lucky and very blessed that the very first clutch I ever hatched had 2 healthy Lilly Whites. Very exciting. So definitely don't give up on your goals, no matter how big or how small they are, even if they take time, because good things do take time and eventually it will pay off. So now I'll show you a picture of their parents real quick. And then, to end it off, I have an exciting update about the isopods. I made a video about them earlier this spring. I'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to check that out. And then I'll see you in the next video. Update. My Rubber Ducky Isopods have had babies. I made a video about these guys a couple months ago. I'll put a link to that video in the description. And it's so exciting that they have already reproduced, because I've heard that this species is a little bit trickier to get to breed. They're really, really tiny, but you can see that that's the mother and that she's brought her teeny tiny babies to eat some Crested Gecko powdered food that I put in here. But yeah, I see 2 of them on that leaf right there. And there was one on the bowl, but now it went down under it.